Palpatine. Was this sort of in the blueprint from Episode 7?
This has been in the blueprint for a long time.
Always to be in Episode 9.
Yeah.
A year ago, I had an email from JJ, and then he called me straight away and said, we're thinking of bringing back the Emperor.
Always to be in Episode 9.
Yeah.
A year ago.
When I come back in the studio, I think of things this way, but when I come back into the studio, I would have seen The Rise of Skywalker, I would have seen The Last Jedi and hated every single bit of it. I've seen The Force Awakens. That could be somewhat nostalgic because, I don't know, maybe it would be. When we come back here, it really will determine my love for Star Wars, which is like terrible, but it was just going to show unless there's change with Lucasfilm and everything. And there's respect for George Lucas, which he deserves and which he's not getting. That's going to determine Star Wars' fate in my eyes.
Inside your head.
Rise of Skywalker is finished. I've got home, it's 3:30 in the morning, and there's a lot of processing to take place. The Rise of Skywalker, the movie itself, tried but just didn't quite get there. I did a 3, like I said in a previous movie, I did a 3-bill thing, so the cinema that I went to was offering to play The Force Awakens and then The Last Jedi and then The Rise of Skywalker to finish off. And I haven't watched the previous 2 movies in I don't know how long, in an awful long time. And I haven't watched The Force Awakens for such a long time purely because I hated The Last Jedi so much. And once again, when I watched The Force Awakens, I actually really enjoyed it. I went to the exact same cinema which I was before. Sort of remember when I went there when it came out at midnight, and my wife was my fiance back then, and for me it brought back some happy memories there. And watching the movie, I felt things. I felt emotionally attached. There were some gripes thing. I think anything beyond Starkiller Base, maybe Maz Kanata's bar, it sort of dwindles a little bit, and especially when Han Solo gets killed off. That's really the tipping point for me, and the duel afterwards just doesn't satisfy. But everything in that movie I felt great and enjoyed, and I was like, I can't remember that I thought I didn't enjoy it, but I do. Sure, it's people have their gripes with it, but I think in its own right it feels like a Star Wars movie, The Force Awakens. And so I enjoyed that. So with that in mind, afterward, it was quite clever really, because when I watched The Force Awakens, all the fresh things were in my mind. The Force Awakens was now recharged in my head. All the questions are in there, refreshed, which is probably a very bad thing to do for The Rise of Skywalker. So then when it went on to The Last Jedi, this is the second time I'm watching it, and my goodness, I just seriously... I don't know what it is. It's just not watchable. I can't enjoy it. I'm constantly taken away out of the movie. The story is terrible. The acting is sort of off-putting, but I think that's because the script is so badly written. It doesn't feel like Star Wars. It doesn't have the Star Wars vibe. There's literally 2 moments I like in Last Jedi. That's with Yoda and Luke on Arc 2, and when Kylo Ren turns around and force chokes General Hux and says, "Long live Supreme Leader," and I feel things then, but the rest of the film I don't feel anything. It feels like a waste of time. I'm continuously reminded in Last Jedi that this doesn't feel like a Star Wars movie. It doesn't feel like it's written by a fan, and the frustration I still have with Luke Skywalker is just as big and upsetting as it was the first time I watched it 2 years ago. So after sort of finishing on the high with The Force Awakens, and then I finished back down again after The Last Jedi, I really wish I skipped it. There was so many people in the cinema as well that was doing the same thing. Well, not so many, like the few that were dotted around. I could see them shaking their head when the same sort of annoying things happened in The Last Jedi, and the things, nonsensical things which don't make sense. Everyone was sort of doing the same thing, really. And it really took me out of it. Oh my goodness, I hate it so much words cannot describe. And after watching that, after The Force Awakens, and then when I was ready for The Rise of Skywalker, then I was kind of really on a low again. The Force Awakens made me think, oh right, yeah, I'm sort of really looking forward to this, and it had the J.J. Abrams feel. And to be honest, I think J.J. Abrams must have worked incredibly hard on this movie, and especially when you think about Last Jedi and what he was left with or given, and he had to create an ending to that, with all the nonsense which happened in the middle film, which didn't respect his film previous to that, and now he has to make a conclusion to it, and it feels like the conclusion sort of somewhat bypassed The Last Jedi, which to me is perfect and great. Like, there's a respectful things to it, and the sort of story continues on with various plot lines. Obviously, Luke's still a Force ghost, etc., and things of that nature. But the only problem that I have with this is the film almost feels like, in many scenes, that it's not earned. Like, I don't feel anything because that story hasn't been built up to something. The middle film should have built up to this, and I feel incredibly strongly that Palpatine should have been, spoilers by the way, should have said that at the start of the video, but Palpatine should have been introduced in the second movie, so at least we have excitement and can feel something. But when you start watching The Rise of Skywalker, I just felt like everything was thrusted upon me all of a sudden. I was like, whoa, this has got incredibly Star Warsy all of a sudden. Like, Kylo Ren straight away on Exegol, and the Emperor's there straight away, and I thought, my god, there's not even a build up to seeing the Emperor or Palpatine. He's there straight away. Like, that's kind of good to sort of fit him in the movie and see what's going on, but it has nothing to do with The Last Jedi. You could almost sort of, apart from Luke turning into a Force ghost, you could just bypass that movie. Now, this is where I think Lucasfilm have made just such a terrible decision, and their filmmaking process is not up to standard, and should have had a serious think about this. And it makes me wonder what the bloody hell was going through their heads as well when they were approving The Last Jedi and the script there, and why J.J. Abrams wasn't consulted previous to that so he could wrap it up. I strongly believe that J.J. Abrams, if he was given the chance to direct all three movies, maybe he was, but if he was going to direct all three movies, I think I would feel a lot more for The Rise of Skywalker, and I think the sequel would have felt more complete. I think there's a different approach with the actors when they're acting as well under J.J. Abrams' guise. Like, it felt more heartwarming, felt more human, it felt more Star Warsy. The humor wasn't forced, it was just there, it was funny. And I, like, going back to The Force Awakens, when I just watched that, there's still jokes in there which I chuckle to, and it's not jokes which are actual jokes, it's just actual humorous moments between characters which don't feel like jokes, and because they don't feel like jokes, they're funny, and it fits into Star Wars. Compared to The Last Jedi, my god, it's like a bloody child had wrote it. Like, all these forced jokes, it's just not funny, and these weird characters interacting with one another, it just doesn't work. Then I had the same sort of thing with The Rise of Skywalker, where it sort of felt like Star Warsy humor again, like nothing was proper, like forced in your face and intentional. It was just humorous, like lines between Poe, C-3PO. It kind of worked, and I was sort of returned back to that again. And every time I was enjoying something in The Last Jedi, especially with sort of the Sith feeling that I was getting there, I was taken out of it because once again The Last Jedi, sayings like "let the past die," kill it if you have to, obviously meaning about the Jedi and the Sith, and then all the crap that went on in there doesn't build up or lead on to anything for The Rise of Skywalker. So it's kind of like you want to enjoy something, you want to feel something for these characters, but when it sort of reaches their climax, like with the duel with Rey, Kylo Ren, it just felt empty to me. And I think it was a good job that I watched The Force Awakens previous to that, because that was kind of fresh, those characters then, and then I had felt more to the endearing moments. Sorry, that should probably be the other way around for you, sort of left to right. But I felt more for the endearing moments which took place in The Rise of Skywalker, like the relationship between Finn and Rey. But there's certain moments in there where Finn was about to say something to Rey, but he never says it. And another thing, when Maz was like in The Force Awakens, And that, with Luke Skywalker's lightsaber, this is another story for another time. Never gets answered. You know, things like that, which are fresh in my head, and just don't really make sense. Now, I think, like, I love Palpatine. Ian McDiarmid is one of my favourite actors. I'd love to meet the chap, get a picture, autograph. You know, I think he's an awesome person. And I loved seeing. I was captivated when I was watching Palpatine and the Emperor. Now, he looked like Palpatine to begin with, sort of morphed into sort of more Sidious thing down the end when he was sucking out the life force, and that was kind of cool. That kind of worked for me. Like, even though it seemed ridiculous, but when he started draining the life out of them both combined, that sort of made sort of Star Wars sense. And then to see him sort of turn into a Sith again, and then realize that he doesn't need to die, that he can be himself and then rule, that started to make me feel excited. That scene where he sort of regenerates himself should be the ending for The Last Jedi. If that was so, that would work perfectly. That would just, I think, work really well for The Rise of Skywalker. So there's more tension and there's more time between the movies for you to start digesting that Palpatine and Sidious has returned and is back. But there hasn't been enough time. There's been no murmurs or rumours or anything in the previous movies to indicate that this might have even been happening. It's because of Rian Johnson so stubbornly just decided that he wanted to kill off Snoke without properly consulting J.J. Abrams. When Snoke was the character that set up, it's just like, it's so... Snoke was such a different character in its own right, I think. I think he stood alone, and when I was watching him in The Force Awakens, I was like, you know, you can't just say that Palpatine just created him all of a sudden. I think there's too many elements which they added in there to make Snoke be his own entity. Now, I would wager a guess that Snoke wasn't meant to be created by Palpatine, that in fact he was something to do with Darth Plagueis. I think that was the original storyline, but because everyone was expecting that in The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson decided to hit the subversion button and obviously kill him off, and he was, you know, kind of no one, or wasn't answered, and left it to J.J. Abrams. So a lot of pressure had been left on J.J. Abrams because of Rian Johnson, and yeah, I don't think that's right. I've seen on the interviews as well with J.J. Abrams, I feel really sorry for him. I think, to be honest, with the gripes which I have with this movie, I think he's put 110% in trying to deliver a Star Wars movie which feels like Star Wars, obviously ticking the boxes, and the amount of pressure he must be under from Disney and Lucasfilm breathing fire down his neck. You can only imagine. And I feel like at the last interviews I was watching him before I watched the movie, he felt like this sort of almost given up type thing, like, it is what it is. I hope that you feel good, better than you did before when walking into the cinema. And that to me shows that he knows that people are going in kind of upset, sort of almost lost with the franchise, and he hopes, you know, that you will enjoy it and then feel like, oh yeah, that was a good Star Wars movie. And that sort of attitude is not this overconfident attitude thinking your film's going to be a masterpiece. It's very humble and sincere, and it's complete polar opposite to Rian Johnson and how he approached his press tour just before his movie, because I seem to remember everyone raving about it, and then he obviously kind of got a bit big-headed and saying, you know, sort of turned it into a piece of artwork. The way I see Rian Johnson's Star Wars movie is, I'm not a fan of abstract art. If someone puts, I don't know, a bit of toilet paper on a brick, sticks it in an art gallery, and then people go around it and then start going, yeah, oh wow, so the story behind this, yeah, those type of people who do stuff like that, that is what Rian Johnson, I feel like, has done to Star Wars, where he thought it was probably an artistic thing that he created, and Star Wars wasn't meant to be like that. It's Star Wars at its very core is meant to be a very simple concept, good and evil. I don't think those lines should be crossed, whereas in the middle film they were crossed, and Luke Skywalker saying the Jedi were a bunch of idiots, and yeah, it didn't work. And those lines between good and evil, you know, the fundamental core of Star Wars, were just all over the place, and it just did not work. in The Last Jedi, whereas you sort of feel the effects of that in The Rise of Skywalker, because that sort of line is now, the Jedi and the Sith, and now the Final Order, I think it was called, the Final Order, now that's rising, which was interesting. But I did say in many videos years and years ago, don't know if you remember, but I always wanted them to delve into Sith mythology, and I was hoping that would happen in The Last Jedi, and that would really work to respect what's come before in regards to Vader killing off Sidious and consequently defeating the Sith and bringing balance to the Force. If you go previous to that, like ancient Sith, then that kind of sort of bypasses the core Sith part which Vader defeated. That's how it works in my head. So anything like Darth Plagueis, that was before Vader. I've completely sidetracked off here, but going back to where I said I was completely, I loved all the scenes with Palpatine and everything, because obviously it's Palpatine, Sidious and the Emperor. I think if he was replaced with Snoke, and Snoke wasn't killed off, and Snoke was revealed to be Darth Plagueis, and then Darth Plagueis was the one that was force draining, and sort of regenerated himself, and he's been sort of living in the shadows, I think would have been a strong enough character and as a sort of evil bad person in his own entity, in his own right, and I think could have worked as the mastermind behind all of this. And that sort of links it up without touching or diminishing Anakin defeating the Emperor on Return of the Jedi. Now, of course, I want to see more screen time the Emperor, like always. That's what I want to see all the time. But I think that could have been done in sort of Star Wars stories, or seen more of the Emperor, especially in Kenobi as well. He could fit in there also. But if Snoke was revealed as Darth Plagueis in the end here, and then Rey was revealed as a Palpatine in there, that still could have worked. And I think that would have been a far better thing to think about. But there's that interview where Kathleen Kennedy mentions that they planned this all along. They planned it all along, that Sidious was always meant to come back. No, she didn't. That was the biggest bunch of baloney that I've ever heard. And even in an interview with J.J. Abrams, I saw that someone mentioned about Palpatine, and when it was an interview with Ian McDermott, who plays Darth Sidious, and he was saying, yeah, he got the call last year for Darth Sidious. Oh, surprise, surprise, that last year was after The Last Jedi, when they was writing the script for The Rise of Skywalker, and then realised, all right, we're going to use the Emperor now. They didn't plan that all along. They can't have done. So after they realised, they completely cocked up and botched up. But anyway, going back to the film, there were plenty of moments in there which I really liked. Something really stood out for me was when Rey was in Arc 2. I really, really, really loved that scene. I didn't like it when we saw Arc 2 in Force Awakens. I've always said I've never liked it. It just looks like an island on Earth, like a documentary. Last Jedi saw way too much of the island. It felt like a documentary still. A bit more atmosphere added this time, but the Dark Force cave and the clicking scene and all those subversions on the island and depressing Luke Skywalker on those weird alien things, I began to detest it again in the movie. When I saw it this one, I was like, oh god, Arc 2 again. But it worked. It really, really worked for me. And Luke as a Force Ghost looked awesome. I thought Luke Skywalker looked brilliant as a Force Ghost. His new look, he looked wise. He was almost Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's when I started to really feel a connection there. And then I remember mentioning in a previous video a long time ago as well about Luke's X-Wing, and a great thing would have been for him to raise it from the ground and then fly off to save the Resistance at the end of The Last Jedi. When he does that in this film, and he's standing there and Rey's looking for a ship, and I thought, it's going to be the X-Wing, and then sure enough, this X-Wing comes up. I love that. I thought that was a really touching scene and a touching moment. And yeah, little bits like that, you can just sort of get the vibes that it's been well thought out, and J.J. Abrams wants to include those sort of moments because he must have known they were so seriously lacking for fans of any sort of fulfillment or fan service like that. It's not even fan service. It should have been done because Luke Skywalker in his X-Wing is just awesome. So to see him do that was good. I would have loved to have seen more of Luke, perhaps Luke training Rey. Now, in regards to the Leia thing, yeah, obviously they used the CGI, younger version of himself, and at a point Leia looked like a Battlefront game to me. It kind of worked, but didn't so much as well, because in your brain just knows, that's the bit that takes you out of it just for a little bit. But that scene, it was good, and I was surprised how much of the Leia scenes sort of fit in. I was very happy with the amount of Leia scenes we had in there, and that made me feel a little bit emotional, because just after watching The Force Awakens as well, Princess Leia looks so cute. And when I went to Star Wars Celebration, I remember just standing there like a creep and just watching her as everyone was queuing up to go and have their pictures, and security guard was trying to move everyone away, and I was just standing there just looking. I was like, can't believe it's Carrie Fisher, and I wish I got a picture with her 2 years ago. It must have been 3, maybe longer, when it was in London Excel. But yeah, that was kind of endearing, and the story there was interesting, that she was teaching Rey instead of Luke, and that was nice. But I feel if they were going to take that approach, then perhaps that should have been done early on in the films. Now, it made me think quite a lot that Princess Leia, perhaps instead of given the same boring job of being a general and reverting back to being a general, a character didn't develop at all since Return of the Jedi. So The Force Awakens, like, it just continued on, like she was in the fight forever. She must have been so tired. You could almost notice as well, like when they run out of footage for her, that was the end, and it sort of didn't make sense, because she's lying there until she turned into Force Ghost later on. It didn't make too much sense to me, but it made me think that Princess Leia's character should have been more of the Jedi base. So perhaps that she found Rey earlier on and then sent her off to Luke, and she's more in tune with the Force as opposed to being a general. So she's a princess still, but more a Princess Jedi. And I think that would have worked a lot better. And then I started to think, well, the fact that R2-D2 is no one's sort of astromech, R2-D2 should have been the sort of custodian, the overlooker, and the guardian for Skywalkers. So he's always by their side. He looks after them all the time, like he did with Anakin and Luke. And I feel like perhaps in the sequels, because there is not really a Skywalker, Ben is a solo. That's how I see it. They didn't want to add a new Skywalker there, an actual Skywalker, so now the Skywalkers is completely finished, kaput, done. But it would have been really awesome to have Princess Leia actually flying around in as a pilot. I think more sort of involved action, sort of wants to help people, as opposed to being a general all the time. I think her and R2-D2, I would love to have seen a scene like that where she goes to save someone and she ends up being just as good as pilot as Luke, and she does something really heroic. That would have been an awesome focus for her in the first Force Awakens, and then perhaps potentially lead on something more Jedi and mystical and wise in the Last Jedi, and then sort of, something lesser in the Rise of Skywalker. Now, something which stood out for me, it was just odd and bizarre, didn't quite understand it, and this was just, makes me think, well, why did you kill him off in the first place? The reason why I hate The Force Awakens, the one bit I hate about The Force Awakens is Han Solo's death, and I feel like that didn't need to happen, and it could have been done in a very different way, where it's sort of something happened to Han, where Kylo Ren doesn't actually kill him, but whatever Kylo Ren did ended up in Han Solo's demise. But this is the point when Princess Leia and R2-D2, she sensed something was going on, so she heads straight to Han Solo straight away, and she rescued a wounded Han, and he's out of it in The Last Jedi, so the focus goes more on Luke, if that makes sense. That could have worked well, and then they all could have been sort of reunited together at the end. That would have worked, I think, perfectly well, and bypass the thing of Kylo Ren killing his dad, because I think that act just still makes me feel a little bit sick. Like, it doesn't feel right. Like, you don't really want to see that character that you loved, Han Solo, just go out like that. It was just, no. And maybe, I think they took more in consideration that Harrison Ford wanted that to happen to his character, but it didn't need to happen because the fans love Han Solo. So to see him sort of turn up in the Rise of Skywalker here just made no sense to me. He wasn't a Force ghost. He was a memory, sure, of Kylo Ren. And that was kind of the only way to put him in. And I think from that point of view, the fact that the way to put him into the movie, it was almost touching, but you're just completely taken out of it, because it felt like they made a mistake by killing him off, so they should bring him in now, even though it doesn't make too much sense. But it makes sense for Kylo Ren's character. Like, it was kind of nice to repeat the same sort of things, and after just watching The Force Awakens there, it was all fresh in my head, so it was kind of almost emotional for me. Like, so many points in this film, I could have been emotionally involved and felt attached. And when I watch Star Wars movies, the originals, I feel something. I don't know what it is. I feel it. I get shivers down my spine. The music, everything, it still makes me feel like that. I don't get it with these movies. It's like on the cusp, but because it hasn't been earned, I don't think Lucasfilm has respected fans very well, or been too nice to them, or maybe Disney. I don't know who it is, but even when I was watching the premiere, and it's just the way they talk, like the hosts, and it's like almost, we're higher up than you, we're here, whatever we say is right, and the angry fans don't belong in Star Wars, and I don't believe that. I think everyone deserves to have an opinion on Star Wars. Star Wars means something different to every single person, and this is what brings me on to why I love George Lucas. Now, compare George Lucas to Rian Johnson. George Lucas made 3 prequel movies that people still talk badly about, even up in Lucasfilm as well. You're making the goddamn sequels, yeah? Why are you even hired if you can't appreciate all the Star Wars movies and like all of them? You know, why do you still have to say, oh, I want it to be like the originals? No, like, you must realise that half your fandom's still massive prequel fans, you know. I was born and brought up with the prequels, and so are many of you. So that's how we feel, yet it's this constant thing like the prequels are bad. George Lucas goes, well, people don't like the movies, and yeah, so I'd stop making movies. He doesn't attack the fans, he doesn't say anything nasty, he doesn't belittle them, doesn't say anything, he just sort of shrugs it off, and he's upset by it. And I feel bad that people speak so badly of the prequels, but it's sort of the same thing like with the Jar Jar Binks Ahmed Best actor, where people were saying, who's bullying things. And those people that were saying so many bad things about Jar Jar Binks, and probably, I don't know, said whatever to Jar Jar, the actor, those people hated it, but then they sort of like the new Star Wars movies, and now, now the blame is sort of pushed onto the people who don't like the Star Wars movies now. I don't know, I'm so tired, I don't know bloody hell what I'm talking about. But yeah, in regards to George Lucas, he would shrug it off, and that's what Lucasfilm should do. Like, they should listen to criticism, fans, what they say. Don't attack your fan base, because then you're going to have serious problems. Because then you get all kinds of weird vibes coming off you, and that's what I get from Lucasfilm. Now, back in George Lucas era, that felt like it didn't even exist. You could say whatever you want, and Lucasfilm would respect that and try and make the best thing they could possibly do for you. Whereas now, it's not that. It's like all these people going, oh no, you don't belong in Star Wars, get out. And if you don't agree with us, then you're not with us, and you shouldn't be watching this. That kind of vibe. And that's the exact kind of vibe with Rian Johnson. And so many things that I've watched and read of him sort of attacking fans and being way too opinionated. You just need to step back and, either just read it and just ignore it. Like, it's kind of the thing, you're sort of giving empowerment to the people who are really vocal, and then, it doesn't work. Whereas George Lucas, can you imagine him being like Rian Johnson and sort of going back at the fans and things? No. Like, I'm sure he's got better things to do in his time. Like, create better things, whereas Rian Johnson is kind of, the fact that he was so responsive to fans and criticism makes me feel like that he must have known that he was making decisions early on in the process that were going to upset fans. So you kind of, like, it's that weird sort of feeling, and that was the weird feeling that I get from the Rise of Skywalker, because of all those things that have been going on, scenes and parts of it I should be enjoying. I feel like, yeah, that could have been good, but it doesn't feel earned. Like, I liked all the new planets that they went to. It felt Star Warsy, like the festival thing, Lando's introduction, that other Kimanji or Jumanji planet or whatever it was. That was cool. It felt Star Warsy. The First Order felt threatening. It felt sort of new and interesting. But in The Last Jedi, it doesn't feel like that. It feels crap, like butter spread on too much bread. But the First Order it just had sort of good feelings. And then this Final Order, which was rising up, I really did like the Star Destroyers, and each of them has a planet-destroying weapon. That kind of makes sense, and then that sort of ups the tension for me straight away that the Final Order is actually a genuine threat, and they could have potentially been rebuilding in the unknown regions, and that, is almost plausible. But I feel like Snoke still could have been in it, and what would have been even cooler if perhaps Snoke wasn't killed off, he was revealed as Darth Plagueis, and then if Sidious maybe was still, in the mix, then there could have been an awesome Sith off at the end, and Palpatine regenerates, takes on Plagueis, and there's this massive Force battle, and it's all over the place, and then, maybe Luke and Leia and everyone, Jedi, come to help. I don't know, it could have been just this crazy thing. In my head, I was really looking forward to seeing Anakin and Obi-Wan, but of course, that didn't happen. Wasn't quite sure why Obi-Wan says this is your first steps in The Force Awakens. It doesn't really lead on to anything. The bit where they was all saying to Rey, get up or whatever, and all the Jedi were saying that. I don't quite know why they'd all be saying that. I think I heard Mace Windu, but I don't think the voices were that clear. It was only in the credits when I saw them listed out, and even then I just sort of missed that as well because I was listening to the music. But Qui-Gon Jinn I heard, may have heard Anakin, I'm not sure. May have heard Obi-Wan, but I needed to listen to it again. Yoda obviously, and Mace Windu, I said this previously to watching it, but Mace Windu, I don't think he learnt the path to immortality and turned into a Force ghost. I think it should have just been Yoda. Qui-Gon kind of makes sense because of what happened in Clone Wars. Ahsoka, did she learn the path to immortality? And I'm not sure. And Luke, Leia, Yoda, and Obi-Wan, I think that would have worked really well. I would like to have seen, just as Luke was lifting up the X-Wing, what would have been really cool to have at that moment Yoda and Obi-Wan sort of appear, and maybe Anakin as well, sort of next to him, and sort of Yoda looking up and smiling like because of what he did lifting up Luke's X-Wing, and it's sort of reminiscent. That would have given me serious chills, but I suppose I felt something during those scenes with Luke. That was awesome. But those are the scenes that really stand out for me. When it was in Kylo Ren's white thing, and they were sort of switching between locations, that was interesting. I think that worked, and that was something new and intriguing. I think J.J. Abrams gets more what works in the Star Wars universe, whereas Rian Johnson, if he was to create something, he doesn't get it. And his idea of some Force wizardry would be, clicking and nothing really happening, and it's just really strange. But J.J. Abrams creates these different things. Force Freeze was good. Force Strain, I know that's expanded universe stuff, but still works and is great. The switching between locations, between the two characters, that was very interesting and kept me intrigued and invested in Rey and Kylo Ren. That worked. So I really liked that feel in there. I really liked Kylo Ren in this, and I think I actually loved Ben Solo's story in this. I think it would have been nice to see more focus on him, maybe a bit more change in the middle film, but I think in this it works well enough to be very enjoyable in places. He looks very menacing with this helmet on again. The Knights of Ren didn't really interest me that much. They were somewhat anticlimactic. I thought they'd have lightsabers or something, and I thought they were a previous Jedi, and when Kylo Ren got his lightsaber and then just sort of wiped them all out, it just sort of thought, well, they probably just thought, just get rid of them, and that was that. So there was kind of moments like that where we just thought all this Kylo Ren nonsense of theories of what they are, who they are, and what they can do, and it just sort of really amounted to nothing. They just had a sort of threatening presence in the movie, and I suppose that was kind of cool. And it was kind of good to see them sort of walk together in unison. That was pretty nice, and I kind of like moments like that. The Final Order, or the First Order at this point, I like the First Order quite a lot. I like the new general on there, and the Hux story was interesting, but I think he was finished off a bit too quickly. But the fact that the First Order were more sort of older people, I think works for a more threatening presence. I don't know if that's because I'm getting older. I don't know, but maybe as a kid, someone my age might feel threatened. I don't know. If someone looked at me, who knows? But I think with the Final Order, I liked the Red Troopers. They were good. They didn't really get that much screen time, I suppose. But I think everyone inside the Final Order Star Destroyers, they should have been like the workers. I feel like you don't need to humanize them. They should just have helmets on and show them. That makes it more menacing and feel more Sith-like. When I saw the diversity, maybe political casting done there again, it started to take me out in moments. And I don't know if that's a thing where I just found the Emperor more menacing because the majority of people just had helmets and were sort of more or less covered up their faces and had no personality or difference. Everyone looked the same, which made it look threatening and odd because of that. But because it's sort of this all-inclusive thing, then it starts to make me think, well, even they must have some morals, and that sort of takes me out of it, if that makes sense. I don't know. But I think it kind of works, and there was a sort of interesting new look, and the concept of the Star Destroyers were good. The Wayfinders worked, I think that worked, but everything that happened to find the Wayfinders just felt so quick and rushed, really came across messy in places, and it was like, whoa, like you're there all of a sudden, like I said at the start of the movie, and whoa, you're Rey's there now, and she's walking to meet Palpatine, and it just, I don't know what it was, especially the moment where they're on the Death Star and they go to Palpatine's chambers, and the music there was when Vader took off his helmet in Return of the Jedi, and it's that really nice Imperial march thing for Anakin, where he plays over Anakin, and then that was sort of put in at that moment when they walked through there, and I can't get out of the fact that the Death Star was completely blown to smithereens and pieces in a massive sparks, and yet it's just there, and it's intact. I kind of liked it where they're using the Wayfinder thing or whatever it was, and sort of lined up with the Emperor's thing. You could see it. That was cool, but it doesn't work because it doesn't make sense why it would be so intact. Like Stormtroopers' helmets everywhere, I didn't quite get that. But when there was in that scene, and there was Rey was in there, and Kylo Ren walks in while she's looking around, and the music was just all over the place. And I thought they made a mistake with the soundtrack, because it was that sort of that music they used for Vader's end, and when he takes off his helmet, and then a little bit of when they're actually in the throne room as well. It sort of overlapped. I was like, is this actually someone edited this like really badly or something? And I was like, whoa, that doesn't make me feel anything really. It just felt a little bit ludicrous that everything was so intact. And also, I was under the impression that there was a lift to go up into the Emperor's chamber, but when they was walking through, it seemed like it was at level with everything else on the Death Star. So I don't get what the lift thing was all about, with the Emperor's guards standing there. But they just seem to walk in from other parts of the Death Star, and just walk straight in like it was level. So I didn't really kind of get that, the geography of that, shall I say. It was just kind of little things like that. Death Star scenes didn't really work for me. It was all a little bit odd and weird. I thought Finn, I didn't realise how much I liked Finn as a character. I thought it was actually very enjoyable watching him again in Force Awakens. They butchered him in The Last Jedi along with Poe, and I think he works well in The Rise of Skywalker, but I would like to have seen, there was implications there which they were sort of hinting that he could use the Force, so he knows what the Force is, and I thought, well, they're going to reveal that all the defects, even the new mate or whatever her name was, all the defects that were all riding on those horse alien things, which are just bloody horses, that they were going to be Force sensitive. So the children, which the First Order, sort of picked out and took to become stormtroopers, the ones that are defects are Force sensitive. That would have been interesting. And then there could have been some later on scene with Rey and the new Jedi Temple, and Finn is actually revealed to be a Jedi. Then that would make more sense for why he was able to sort of use Anakin's lightsaber and duel a little bit earlier on. That would sort of link that up and sort of clear that up a little bit for me anyway. So a little bit more development with this character I would have liked. There were some really funny moments with Poe, like when he's doing that noddy thing to is it Zori or that bounty hunter woman, and it was like, and she was like no, and that was good, and it was not a joke that's in your face. It was just what a character would do, and that was funny. And like I said, in contrast to Last Jedi, that it would just be some cringy joke if Rian Johnson was writing it. So those kind of moments to me say how much I enjoyed J.J. Abrams' directing. Like, I think the champ's got a really hard. Is the press the word? I'm not sure. But the fact that he had this is a mammoth task to finish, and the movie felt like Star Wars. It might have been all over the place, maybe it might not worked in places, but why doesn't it work in places is because The Last Jedi once again has affected this movie like it affects its predecessor as well, and because The Last Jedi doesn't work, there is no investment in this movie, and there's anything that happens here doesn't feel earned as much as it could have been if thought was put into it in the middle film, but it wasn't. So who's to blame for that? Rian Johnson, of course, was writing, and the arrogance of the storytellers who approved it, and we all know who that was. So what does that say for now? Is this the point where there might be a change at Lucasfilm? And how do I feel about Star Wars after watching this? Would I watch the movie again? I think in hindsight, yes, I think I would probably watch it again, whereas The Last Jedi I wouldn't whatsoever. But the problem is with this at the moment, I didn't really get the whole Rey turning herself, saying she's a Skywalker. I thought it was a really endearing thing to see Luke and Leia sort of looking over at the homestead. But why would she really go to the homestead? I don't quite understand. And that woman who comes up is just casually on a whatever it is, camel thing, so close. I was thinking, why didn't they use an Eope thing or whatever they use on Tatooine? Not this hairy beast thing. Why would you have hairy beast animals in a climate that's so hot? I don't quite understand. But she just asks who she is conveniently. Oh, Rey. It's like, here it comes. Rey Skywalker. It's like, no. Like, Rey Palpatine. There's nothing wrong with saying Palpatine. Like, it's kind of nice that I suppose you said Rey Skywalker. But it's none of the sequel thing has really been about the Skywalkers. It's been about Ben Solo and Rey Palpatine, and I think if they were going down the Palpatine route, then that should probably be revealed in the middle one again, so it ups the stakes. And the surprise is, like I said, because of the ruining of The Last Jedi, it almost feels like it doesn't feel earned when it takes place in the Rise of Skywalker, which is sad because I really want it to feel earned. And I think poor J.J. Abrams has probably thought, well, I have to do this because, this is what should have really happened previously. And I think he's thought really hard what to put in there. So yeah, I think, would I say this is a success and would it make me feel more Star Warsy and make me want to go to Star Wars, like be more invested in Star Wars? Well, part of me feels like I've completely had enough with Star Wars. For now, compare that to my previous reactions, reviews, and how I was before I watched The Force Awakens. I was so excited, the hype, everything was to the max and extreme, and to watch this decline rapidly in the middle and now sort of dwindle and Dwayne's now is probably the same for many other people as well, and that's not good. That's not how you should finish a movie. You shouldn't really be finishing a trilogy like that, sorry. And I feel like now that, do I feel a bit tired and exhausted with Star Wars? Yes, I do. There is nothing really Star Warsy alive or any potential things going on in the future that I'm looking forward to. Maybe Clone Wars, but that feels like that should have happened ages ago because the trailer came out felt like a year ago, or even longer. But I'm not interested in Mandalorian purely because I live in England and that it hasn't come out. Like, it doesn't come out in March, and even on Instagram, like, so many spoilers took place. Obviously you can't see them, but even Star Wars on Instagram are spoiling it. They must know that we haven't seen it, so why would I want to watch it, like, with Baby Yoda and stuff? That sort of, it doesn't intrigue me. Everyone's already spoiled it, and it sort of ruined it for me already, and I haven't even watched it, so I don't really have interest in that. I've seen some scenes that people have posted. I do have minor gripes that a lot of the people in there don't feel Star Warsy and feel like it's a very TV program. I think there's some really cool things which I've seen, but it doesn't get me excited. It doesn't make me feel excited like it's a massive, amazing project. But that's me. Tons of people love The Mandalorian. That's great, and I'm glad that it has that gritty, Star Warsy feel. But my main interest and concern should be with, and same with Lucasfilm, should be with the movies. Star Wars has always been movies, and that should be the core and main front of their thinking and creative process, at the forefront. But it's not, and it makes you feel like this is going to be a film that's going to be forgotten quickly, along with the sequels. There's going to be a lot of stragglers on who enjoyed it for various reasons, but from a storytelling perspective, I don't think it's really going to stand the test of time like the other Star Wars movies. You may say whatever about the prequels, but the stories are still strong, powerful, almost timeless, and work with endless quotable scenes and brilliant Star Warsy moments with iconic music. The music in this was really great as well. Really enjoyed it. John Williams doesn't fail, and I think his weakest composition was probably during The Last Jedi for me, but that's purely because he was given content which really doesn't merit good composition. Well, it doesn't lend itself to really intense John Williams music. It was just, you had to compose what you had for the monotone scenes. Is that the word I'm looking for? I don't know. My goodness, I'm so tired now. But yeah, overall, I think my love for Star Wars at the moment is probably, like I said, done. I feel done with it, and yeah, it's a very strange feeling, and I don't know how I want to proceed with Star Wars, and to be honest, because it was always my massive hobby and I loved it so much, but it's not so much the movies, it's even the things that have gone in the background, and watching all the things that Lucasfilm do, like the Star Wars show, how the hosts act in there, and when they do these live events and sort of picking up on this sort of massive, they always mention there's a massive section of the fandom which are bad, and when Kelly Marie Tran was getting interviewed, the first thing they interviewed her on the red carpet or some interview recently, and it was about bad fans and things. No, don't mention bad fans that, don't even bring them up. It's such a strange thing, and strange vibes, they're digging and pressing and pointing at fans and blaming you for things, and I felt guilty for nothing I've even done, and that's the vibe that I get from Lucasfilm. And does it feel like it needs to be sort of updated and sort of return to its roots a little bit more? I think so. I think maybe the sequel trilogy will give them something to think about. I don't know, but it doesn't inspire me with hope with future projects which are going on. Mandalorian doesn't inspire me with hope, but probably because I haven't really been given a chance to watch it. I would have paid for Disney Plus straight away to watch it, but I haven't had that opportunity, because somehow Disney thought it would be a great idea to release everywhere else, but in England, then I'm not going to bother watching it, because I'm not waiting till March to see something 10 years too late. That's not great. They should have held on a little bit until everyone could watch it at the same time. So yeah, that's my sort of stubborn issue there. Kenobi, I feel very strongly that it should be a movie in itself and not a TV series, and whatever the god bloody hell they're going to be doing after that with Star Wars, I don't know. So in this movie, I kind of like Rey in this. I thought she had good moments. I thought the Force abilities sort of made sense. There was a bit of training to begin with. She wasn't cringeworthy like she was in The Last Jedi. She's quite endearing, I noticed, in The Force Awakens, and I kind of felt that again here. And her overconfidence and abilities didn't feel forced, or like it wasn't earned too much, because there was a little bit of training, and it was kind of a good idea that they said, well, Leia was training, but Luke should have been training her a lot more, I think, or by her side, and maybe teaching her some vital things. That would have been good to see in this one. but it didn't take me out of it, and I thought Rey was actually quite a likable character in this, and I think it works very well with a group together going off doing stuff, whereas it didn't work well in The Last Jedi. It was just too convoluted. The characters they sent off to do stuff, Finn and Rose together, it shouldn't have been Finn and Rose, it should have been Finn and Poe. The characters in this I really liked. They used more R2-D2, which was good, but he wasn't nowhere integral to this film. And I don't think C-3PO was, but he was still humorous, and I think it worked. But I thought they almost killed him off, and also Chewie as well, and I just wasn't even surprised at that point. But yeah, my goodness, we've talked an awful lot about it, and those are just kind of my initial feeling, even probably by the tone of my voice. I could have been talking like crazy, and I was excited, loved this scene, loved that was so awesome. I was also told that John Williams would be composing every theme in it, so I don't know how I was going to do that, but I thought it was going to be Jewel of Fate in there. If it was in the trailers, it really built me up, and that's my favourite piece of music ever. And I thought, well, at least it'd be in the credits then, and there would be all the themes, Star Wars themes, to sort of finish it off, and it wasn't. I felt a little bit cheated there. Sort of misadvertising maybe, but the music's a strong point for why I enjoy movies, and I loved hearing Sidious's theme throughout of the movie. Let me know everything which you think down below. Like I said, I want to hear every single little detail you think up in your head and how you feel about this film. Now I've seen it, I'm going to be reading intently and thoughts and opinions and see what the sort of overall gauge of this film is. Now the critics say, oh god, I bloody hate critics, because of The Last Jedi again. You've got The Last Jedi to thank for that, but because how wrong they were with The Last Jedi, I don't really know what they've said this, or I know that they felt this film wasn't respectful of The Last Jedi, which made me like this film more. So in terms of Star Wars movie, it felt like a Star Wars movie. I enjoyed it from that point of view, certainly, but now you know how I feel about sort of different scenes, and it could have been a lot better, but I think The Last Jedi is to blame for that and no one else. The movie was enjoyable. I'm glad I went to see it. I just wish that J.J. Abrams was given the reign, was put in the helm to direct all 3 movies and kept with a coherent story throughout. I think that would have worked a lot better for the sequel and this trilogy and Star Wars franchise in general. But I think who's to blame for that? It's probably Kathleen Kennedy for firing so many directors and not having a clear path, and it just felt all over the place. Whether that's pressure from Disney to deliver, I don't know. But I think well done J.J. Abrams for creating this with what you were left after The Last Jedi. My God, I mean, how could anyone create a suitable ending after that? But I think you tried very hard. Are you watching this, J.J. Abrams? Probably not, but I mean, if how I feel about J.J. Abrams, he must have been, like I said, a mammoth task to undertake, and it must come up with so many different plots and stories. I think no, that doesn't work because of this happening in Last Jedi. So I think the only way to go forward with this, I think it worked well. I think the story was well thought up, and sort of the final order and the ships in the background and being a credible threat, and the interesting things with Sidious and delve into Sith mythology. I liked that. There's that sort of dark, ominous thing, and that's what I enjoyed in Star Wars. Rey defeated Palpatine. I felt a little bit off because Rey was able to just do it with 2 lightsabers. And Mace Windu should have just done it with 2 lightsabers, and so should have Anakin and everyone else and Luke, and just pushed Force Lightning back to the Emperor. Problem solved. Felt like that was a little bit easy. It almost had enough there. I'll just give him another lightsaber. That's how she'll defeat the Emperor. Okay, easy as that. I think something else could have been put into that a little bit more. Perhaps Kylo Ren with Rey is able to do something to defeat the Emperor together. So at least there's 2 people there. So that to me shows that Rey's more powerful than Mace Windu and Yoda. No. And also Kylo Ren scene at the end, I actually really wanted Ben Solo to live and be a Jedi and actually be a couple with Rey. Like, he kind of had that redemption with his father in the memory scene. Then he's sort of living as a Jedi again sort of seems right, because if Anakin turned back to the light side and he didn't die, then what the hell is he gonna bloody do? He's responsible for the death of millions or whatever. So at least Ben Solo sort of had that whole father issue. Sort of, he had approval from his dad in his memory kind of thing. That kind of works. So I was hoping that there would be a relationship. I was never a Reylo fan, but after I saw that, I just really wanted Kylo Ren and Rey to sort of be together, and then them together create a Jedi Order. That would have been nice. And I thought it was good seeing Ben Solo do something heroic and make a decision. I thought that was kind of powerful when he just threw his lightsaber. Like, Kylo Ren is dead, and throwing that lightsaber, which is Kylo Ren's lightsaber, was throwing away Kylo Ren itself. And I think that worked, and I thought that was kind of touching and made me want to see, it made me crave Ben Solo to see more of him. But like I said, this could have been more involved in the middle film, as opposed to Kylo Ren reverting back to Kylo Ren at the end of The Last Jedi. There could have been opportunity for more Ben Solo and Jedi-like moments like that, which could have been cool to defeat the Emperor or Snoke at the end. But there could have been many variations for this. Like I said, I was thinking about rewriting it all and visualizing it and music behind it and work as close as what we got, but making integral changes at the same time. But that's a massive project, which I could be interested in doing after my Kenobi one, after that's come out. Problems with rendering, but that will be out too soon. But anyway, I really hope that you enjoyed my initial review. If you've made it this far, then congratulations. Wow, you must be a SKYMAN universe fan for that. So my channel and I feel extremely humbled that you are here, and we're happy and glad that we could talk to you about it all. So that's how I feel with it. And you could take what you want from my thoughts and opinions there as to how I feel about it. I'll be very intrigued to see what is the next step for Lucasfilm, what's going on in terms of who's running it. A lot of people would like Jon Favreau. I still think that Dave Filoni is a good candidate to send it forth. George Lucas's sort of brainchild. That would be a good direction. But I think if there was to do another trilogy, it needs to be set out completely before the get-go and they start filming on the first film. Like, the story needs to be laid out fully. And what are they going to do? I think the Skywalker saga is kind of being killed off. And that's that. Even though it's not a Skywalker thing, it never really felt like a Skywalker thing for me. If it was a Skywalker thing, I think it should have been Luke's son and kept the sort of son thing. So, Vader, Luke, and then Luke's son. I think it should have been that. And if Kylo Ren and Rey were still in the mix and then interact with Luke's son, that would have been pretty awesome as well, and created a sort of trio between them. Would have worked. But many opportunities were there which I feel like could have been tweaked to make better. But like I said, hopefully I'll be able to sort of rewrite and give you a different version and make it as film-like as possible for you to enjoy. So hopefully that's something you turn towards the sequels, because when I write these things down, like during that film, I was just thinking so much how I'd do this, that, change this, and think, wow, revelations are coming, this could be awesome. So I'll be sure to, I have a very creative mind, so I'll be sure to try and create that for you if that's something that you want. That's my reaction to the Rise of Skywalker. Sorry, it turned into a bit of an essay. I thought I was going to be here for about 10 minutes, but this is what happens with Star Wars. Of course, I'm passionate. I've always loved Star Wars. This is affected choices and decisions throughout my whole life. It's sort of forged me into the person I am, along with you and many other people. I just wish Lucasfilm would feel that when it comes to creating, and I feel like this sequel hasn't really been created for a fan like me, and perhaps a fan like you as well. But it was what it is, and I think the Rise of Skywalker, yeah, a bit messy, kind of works. Well done, J.J. Abrams, a lot of hard work put into it. I don't want to say anything bad about someone, because that's, think of the hours and work that's been put into that movie, but I feel slightly irritated that people high up and their decision-making process, and what should have been a clear decision in regards to The Last Jedi, it would have made the Rise of Skywalker a great film for me. But that's how I think. Let me know what you think. Write it down below, like I said. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already, and like this video if you want to, and if you like it. No pressure whatsoever. Okay then, take care of yourself, and remember, the Force will be with you always.